I personally, I think VR is definitely going to be a big part of the future of games. I think that there are limitations at the moment based mainly around control schemes, but I think there is an awful lot of new stuff that we can design for VR within those limited frameworks, which people have never seen before. And in that respect, it's the first time that gaming hardware has excited me since PlayStation 1. I said this in another interview, but yeah. So it's been a long time coming, obviously, and there's a lot of hurdles to overcome. But I think maybe over the next 5-10 years, we'll see it become a major sector of the gaming industry. And I think for other developers, it's definitely worth investigating in, especially if you can find some funding towards it, and there's a lot of interest in it. Maybe experiment with a prototype beforehand, see what you can build up. Do it in your spare time. That's how we got into it, and it kind of escalated from there to now that we have half of our 27-man team working on VR stuff. And it seems like it's going to keep growing for us as well. So I think it's definitely a risk worth taking for developers.
I think VR for me personally is one of the most exciting things about the game development scene right now. I think it's probably the best way to put it for me is that it's something that both small developers and big developers and everyone in between is excited about, and also trying to solve really, really huge problems. And no one has them all solved, and no one is really like that much closer. We're all kind of working together. There isn't like one part of the industry that's going to be able to just like solve everything for us. And it's something that kind of unifies us in a really cool and interesting way, aside from the fact that the technology is really cool. And so for someone like me who has always loved the first-person perspective, I think it's the best way currently that we know to get the insanely deep level of immersion. I think you can kind of explore new avenues of exploration of atmosphere, of mystery, just in the ability to look around with your head and all the subconscious things that kind of go along with that. And for me, that's just insanely exciting. So I think it's a great thing for the industry moving forward. I don't think it needs to be every game or every studio needs to do that only going forward. But I think it's something that everyone should at least look at and consider as something to potentially look into.
I think VR is an amazing technology, and I'm very happy we're finally here, that we can use it for projects. But I do think that the install base is still too small. And as well as we try to incorporate VR in the flock, but that game is actually a tad too fast to be properly enjoyed in VR. So I hacked in support for VR in that game, and I found out that it was too fast, and also that true games that are really good for VR should be designed for VR and VR only. So the install base is also still too small. So if I were to make a new game with VR, I would make it very short and sweet, a small experience that wouldn't keep you hooked for hours, but mostly 30 minutes tops. Something that's new, revolutionary, and not like other games, not a first-person shooter or anything, just something new.
So many people obviously are banking on it being a big thing, but having worked with VR, I found it, as a developer, it's super exciting to work with. But as a piece of consumer electronics, I think the barrier to entry, not just for developing, but for actually picking up and playing casually, is too high. And I think that's going to prevent widespread adoption in a way that most people anticipate.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's getting there it's getting towards that stage as things are. Like the Gear VR works perfectly with, at most a small gamepad. I think you definitely you have to pay attention to the best practices, the rules of best practices for developing for VR. Like not taking control away from the player, having the movement be based either in a cockpit or have them in a standard a small area, or even just seated throughout, like our first game Esper. You're basically seated throughout. You can move around like from left to right and look under the table and stuff, but the world just transforms around you. And similar to the Aperture demo that Valve have done for the Vive, that's similar. I mean, you're obviously walking around in a small space in that, but again, it's limited movement. There's still a hell of a lot you can do within that. You can like really aim for quality over quantity, which is really cool.
I think VR is a very interesting technology. Whether it's the next big thing is still still to be seen, but. Yeah, definitely very interested, just because the whole immersion thing. I've not really been able to experience the same level of immersion in anything else.
It's very hard to say whether or not it's the next big thing, but what's definite is that it has very big capabilities for future possibilities for games. I mean, the immersiveness of experiences of computer games these days, you have to expand on what's there in the market right now. And the VR is really one thing that is able to break through one of the barriers of gaming these days in order to create something that is so capable of immersing the player in any type of story. Yeah, that it becomes something that really touches upon the pure enthusiasm and the pure fantasy of the player itself.
I'm pretty sure it's going to be a big thing. I'm not sure it's going to be like the next big thing that changes everything. But I think if we treat it well and as developers find some cool interaction models for VR, we're off to a good start. I think there's some cool stuff coming. I've seen the HTC Vive, I've seen the Oculus development kits, and they're pretty damn amazing.
Ever since we started having screens for our computers, you've seen them like grow and grow and grow and get bigger and bigger. And we're finally at the stage where they get smaller and smaller again, but you have a bigger vision of what you see. And I think that's kind of amazing. Like, instead of wrapping your whole room in screens, which it actually looked like we was going to do for a while, we stopped doing that, and instead we have it all around us, right? So we can completely go into the experience of the game.
If the VR going casual and they manage to like make it so accessible to people and they actually buy it with with one big hit game, and people really have the VR and buying new VRs.
My personal hope is that it doesn't necessarily become its own thing, because what you see right now is people trying to make you walk around a room or go all crazy with it. I'd like to see VR being used more as a screen. So when you are at your computer, you put on your headset, and instead of having a screen, you have the whole interface all around you, and you can, from the comfort of your seat, you can touch the interface and have that at the tip of your fingers, like in the sci-fi movies. I mean, how cool is that?
VR will be a big niche thing, I guess. I mean, I don't know how many units they will sell, and if it has to be big, they have to sell millions of units, so they must bundle it like with consoles. So you see Project Morpheus for the PlayStation, and if they only sell like, let's say 250,000 units, then you have a too small market. I don't know. We've seen some great tech here, like the HTC Vive, which must be pretty amazing. I didn't see it myself, but some of my colleagues tried it yesterday, and the immersion factor is pretty great. So I can see this in a household, in a gaming household. But I think it's too hard to make a solid prediction on that right now.
Like, at some point, I think it will just take the place of the monitor, because like at some point we won't need monitors anymore.
I don't think it's gonna become mainstream. I actually don't. I think it's become a niche or like a part of gaming where you have like very different games and different interaction models. Because in my opinion, the games that we have don't fit on VR. So you cannot cram every game on VR. You actually have to make interaction models that make sense for VR, because VR is a very different kind of experience, and you should treat it like that and not as the next cool thing.
In long enough, we will obviously have glasses that you can see through anyway, like what you see with the HoloLens right now. That's probably something that's going to be even further developed, so that you can see the world, but you also see the interface of what you're doing, and also like completely engulf yourself in the game or whatever it is you're doing at the moment, so that you can switch that out. But if someone comes in the room with you, then you can just turn it off, and it's just like regular glasses, so you can see through it. So yeah, I totally do. I feel like with Google Glass was probably a first step towards something where everybody will just have a pair of glasses, so everybody will be inside of a computer all the time.
Yeah, I think niches are most of the time worth it, because you can have you have a very specific audience, and that specific audience is often willing to pay a higher price. So I don't think there will be much of a casual market for VR, but titles that actually use the interaction in the room that they got. So I think it's going to be a very specific part of game development, and it's going to be a very specific part of developers doing that. And I don't think it's becoming a mainstream thing, and I think you will have to focus on the development for VR, especially really core VR products have to be developed in a different way than other games have to be developed.
I actually developed I helped the student team as they developed the game with VR, and it's just crazy because the game itself in VR is like the next step of being inside the game. If they manage to let you freely move and interrogate with your hands, like they have approached with nunchucks right now, it's crazy. It's just crazy. If they manage, it's not even for the game, it's for everything.
So I would absolutely love it if VR was the next big thing, and I would absolutely love to see it take off. But I don't think it will, and the simple reason is because I think that VR is going to be incredibly expensive, and I think it's going to be too expensive for consumers. If you look at something like the Oculus, they said originally that it was going to be, they were going to try and keep the price down, and they really haven't, and I don't think it's in a price range that the average consumer is going to be willing to buy. And then you move up to something like the HTC Vive, Steam's VR, that thing is going to cost so much money because of all of the tech that comes with it. So I think that the money side of things is going to be a giant hurdle for VR. If they can get the prices down, hopefully it'll work, but right now I don't think it has a chance.
People thought the same about 3D, and that never really caught on, so I think this, I don't know, it could work, it could not work. It's hard to predict the future, but I think if developers give it a try, and if developers believe in it, then that definitely would higher the opportunities of it becoming the next best thing, because there would just be much better experiences, better games for it. So
yeah, if they manage to not too overpriced, definitely. And I ordered my Oculus, and I hope I can say Oculus, and not that I make a promotion, but yeah, it's great. It's really great, and looking forward for all the different approaches beside games.
I think there's an immediate future. So from the next from now pretty much until maybe 5 years time, there's going to be a big burst of virtual reality projects. We're already seeing huge amounts of funding coming into the virtual reality space. I know companies that are starting up all over London, all over the world, on the back of the idea that VR is going to be the next big thing. So I think we're going to see loads of really cool stuff, and we're going to be like, wow, VR is a thing. But I think there's going to reach a point when we're we've done all the stuff that we can do using this. At least, I mean, all it really adds from a gameplay perspective or an interface perspective is the fact that we can look around in this 3D space. So input hasn't really necessarily been solved yet, I don't think. I don't know really how it's going to be solved. So really, I think after this 5-year period, when we start to realize, actually this isn't what people were envisaging, maybe then we're going to see either a slow decline or something is going to replace it.
So I think VR games can be interesting if it's done right. I think so far developers have mainly been using it as a sort of a gimmicky add-on and made the game first and added sort of VR support later on. And I think if the game is built from the ground up and designed from the ground up with in mind that it's going to be used with a VR headset, I think it's going to be much better. It hasn't been done so far because, well, there aren't a lot of consumers yet that have a VR headset, obviously. So, but I think it can work really well in the future.
VR is an amazing immersive experience. It's it really gets you focused into the game. It blocks out everything else. I mean, it's like wearing headphones instead of listening to speakers, right? It's really gets you in there and really immerses you. However, it's a very anti-social thing for me. Like I don't see part of gaming for me. It was growing up with my brothers on the couch and fighting over the controller and playing like NHL. And I don't really imagine kids like that wearing like 3 sets of headsets and you know, I don't see that happening. So I think it's definitely it's obviously already here. It's already coming. It's definitely going to have a big place in the market, and there are huge players in the space. You know, Facebook and all that. They obviously have a vested interest. I think I'm more interested almost to see what happens with VR outside of games than within games.
Everybody is still searching for perfect usage of VR. So I'm sure something big will happen. Maybe there are already some plans that we are not sure, and they're coming soon. So for sure, big potential. Just I guess it will be a nice surprise to everybody.
There's a limitations to what you can do, but there were limitations to what we could do with the first consoles, and we still achieved a hell of a lot and grew from it. And you know, I think the queues for VR headsets at conferences say it all. Like, I heard that the Oculus queue at Gamescom was the most insane queue at the show, beyond everything else. So that says it all. I mean,
have you tried the HTC Vive?
No, not yet. No, we're on the list for a dev kit. I've tried everything, but we have dev kits for everything besides the Vive. But I've been talking to HTC literally today about that. So hopefully we'll be getting our hands on that soon.
Yeah, everybody who tried it really told me like wonders about it.
Yeah.
It was like there's nothing comparable to HTC Vive, even Oculus.
I think the Oculus CV1 is as good. It's better in terms of picture quality, definitely, and the tracking is amazing. The thing that I've been amazed by most lately was the Oculus Touch. That thing is incredible. I mean, there was I didn't get a chance to try it at E3, but I tried it at Gamescom, and I can now understand why, you know, people like Giant Bomb were saying it was the most exciting thing at the show, because it really is like entirely immersive and incredible. You feel like you are there. You have an incredible sense of presence with it.